don't have principals here. We try not to have supervisors here. We want to have people who are going to feel comfortable with each other. That wasn't a pointed remark.
I was going to ask.
All I supervise is my desk.
But it is a partnership of colleagues so that you can observe each other and give each other feedback. Again, you're not evaluating each other. You're not supervising each other. You And the number one cause of losing a first job is not lack of skills, but not lack of the technical skills to be able to carry out that job, but lack of social skills. Can't get along with the workers. Can't get along with peers and colleagues. So we have a situation where students are in essence finishing their education unprepared to deal with the social realities of our society. You have to be able to work with people cooperatively. So, again, Kagan says, and other people too working in cooperative education say that teachers cannot avoid this. Teachers cannot say that the moral or social development of children is not their realm. It is not their problem. Because kids are coming to school like this. And teachers can do something about that. They can do something that will impact children so that they stop some of this dysfunctional behavior. An interesting statistic, too, based on a study that was done of the amount of time that teachers talk in the classroom compared to the amount of time that students talk. 80% of the time, teachers were talking. So what role does that leave for students in a traditional approach? Passive consumers, passive listeners. And yet, we say that we want to turn out kids who will be active participants in society, in the job market. So we're saying one thing and doing something else. And a mismatch there. Again, just some other interesting notes that give you some more background about why we need such a big emphasis on cooperative education. We are now in a people-oriented economy. We went from an industrial and manufacturing type of economy to an information management type of economy. In fact, in 1950, only 17% of the people were employed in information service type related jobs. In 1980, more than two-thirds of the workforce was employed in those types of positions. Not only that, but industry itself is adopting a cooperative model. You all know about the great interest that there's been, for example, in the automotive industry in looking at what Japan is doing, which uses a different model, not quite as competitive or more cooperative model than we've used here in the States. Add to that the whole rate of change in our society is accelerating. Not only is change happening, but it's happening at faster rates. For example, the volume of scientific and technical information doubles every 5 years. And it's estimated that by the turn of the century, it will be doubling every 2 years. That means that we're going to be having kids, if we're stuffing them full of this knowledge, if we're making them passive consumers of knowledge, we're going to be having kids whose base of knowledge will be obsolete before they even get out of school. Also, our economic change is happening faster. Whereas it took us 100 years to move from an agricultural to an industrial economy, it took us only 30 years to move from an industrial to an information services economy. So change itself is happening at a faster rate. What we need to make sure happens with kids is not that they have a set body of knowledge in their being, but rather that they know how to find out and how to produce knowledge. That they have the flexibility to be able to learn what's new, what's changing, and to change along with it. Some of the factors that are cited as contributors toward this increased competitiveness in our society are, first of all, urbanization. The studies that have been done show that the more urbanized communities become, the more competitive the individuals within those communities also become. We need to also look at the whole issue of racial diversity and the fact that by the year 2000, they estimate that 53% of the population of California will be minority in terms of power and access to institutions. name tags. He's gone. Cecilia. Linda.
Yeah.
Carol. This character feels that a major problem facing Americans is this sense of isolation that they have. They're alone. They don't have families that they can reach out to. And so a major part of his campaign involved this theme of loneliness. As a result, he promises that if he's elected, he's going to take immediate action to correct the situation. And what he's going to do is that he will designate specific middle names for all of the inhabitants of the United States. And these names will be added to the phone book listings. So that, for example, when a person with the assigned middle name of Daffodil goes to a new town, this person could look in the telephone directory and look up all of his cousins, because all people with the same middle name are cousins from now on. So this means that this person will not be alone and lost in a new city. He'll have friends, he'll have family that will take him in, take care of him, orient him. Now, you all have middle names. You need to put on your name tag now. What you need to do, I'm going to get to it. What you need to do is stand up, walk around, and find your cousins. And when you find them, you're going to have your first family reunion. And so you need to talk about, you can talk about something professional, like what you've been doing in terms of your careers, recent positive experiences with that. You can make it something a little bit more personal if you like. Take about 5 minutes or 5 or 7 minutes to hold your family reunion. And then, after you've talked about, after you've shared some information about each other, I want you to spend another 1 or 2 minutes talking about how you felt and what you did as you went through this process. And then we'll come together as a group. Okay, so.
We're not involved in this now, right?
I remember doing some like this in Norman Hall for after learning tribes. Remember?
No, I don't do that.
You didn't try. You didn't try. Yeah, because
It's good.
All of a sudden, it dawned on me that you started in second grade, and not knowing really what to do. Yeah, she was pretty decent working. They're doing better than involved with the outside
I'll find out. Let me pass out to you the description of this activity, because I think it's a wonderful team-building activity and a wonderful activity just for breaking a lot of tension in the classroom. By the way, if some of you thought that this was an activity that was a little bit silly, this is what executives do. Okay? This is part of the executive training that goes on in a lot of companies. We're going to do this with the superintendent. Just some closure types of things and last minute items that I've forgotten. First of all, I just needed to remind everybody to sign up. If you haven't put your name on the sign-up sheet, make sure that you do. Pass it around again in case we didn't catch everybody. Secondly, I need to remind you that there will be a number of options for you in terms of your non-release time. For example, we're working with Stanislaus State right now to get credit, continuing education credit. I think they're going to give us 6 units for this. We should know by the next meeting. So if that's an option, you'll need to think about whether you want to take that option or not. And there will be a charge